Welcome to Inside the Music with Andy Schwartman. Here is your host, Mr. Andy Schwartman. Take it away, Andy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Inside the Music with Andy Schwartman. I am your host, Andy Schwartman. Tonight, we are going to be talking about the first three records by one of our favorite bands in the whole world, Aerosmith. So to kick us off, Senor Reeek's got the first record to start us off. I've got the second record, and Tony and our co-host and friend has got the third record.
Well, the only thing you got right about that was that Tony's our friend.
Yes.
We're
having a little problem in here. Sorry.
That's okay. It's okay. It's how we roll here.
I'll explain what the problem is in just a moment.
It's the human element of the show where we just stumble along, and that's how we keep it real. Tony, thanks for being with us tonight. I know Aerosmith is one of your all-time favorites. Maybe your number one favorite band of all time?
Number one favorite of all time, yes.
January 5th, 1973, they released their first album. Its peak chart position was number 21 and eventually went on to sell 2 million copies. Tell us more about that debut album from Aerosmith.
Here it is, right here. The
Nice.
infamous first record, and it did not catch fire right away. It actually had a lot of slow burn to it, and it was released a couple different times, a couple different album covers, 2 or 3 album covers. Actually, what you'll see, it was the ballad on the album "Dream On" that gave this album life and kind of got that spark going. But it definitely wasn't an overnight success by any means. And there was a lot of differences on this record. If you listen to this record, you listen to Steven Tyler, you're going to notice that he sounds very different on the debut record. Tyler didn't think he had a good voice. He was actually a drummer at heart, and he didn't think his voice was good, so he did like a false voice on this record. And you can hear it on a lot of the tracks. He shook that after this record was over, but it's definitely noticeable. But this is a killer record. It's raw rock and roll. You got tracks like "Make It," "One Way Street," the cover "Walking the Dog," which is one of my favorites. And I guess the 2 big hits on here, the 2 big standouts would be, again, "Dream On," which to this day is a show closer for the band, and "Mama Ken." So, like I said, it was a great first start, but it wasn't by any means an overnight success for this record. So, but I dig it. I love it. It's raw. It's gritty. It's what Aerosmith is to me. So,
I love that old the cover of "Walking the Dog." I'm a big fan of like old R&B and Memphis R&B, like Rufus Thomas. And it's interesting that the Stones, I think, also covered "Walking the Dog," and later Rat did a version of it.
yeah.
And speaking of covers, we know that "Mama Ken" from this record was later covered by who, Andy?
This particular band, is it okay if there's a little build up here? Is that all right?
It's your show, brother.
Thank you, Rick. There is a little rock and roll band that came out with their very first record the year I was born, and I'm talking about Guns N' Roses. And that is who Senor Reeek is referring to here.
That's right. Great version of "Mama Ken."
I tease people all the time by saying that, and I tease myself all the time by saying that I feel really old because "Appetite for Destruction" was released when I was born, the year I was born. I remember looking on the back of it going like, oh, no way. There's no way.
Guns N' Roses did a pay-per-view show in Paris, and there's a great video out there. You can probably find it on YouTube of Aerosmith and Guns jamming "Mama Ken" together. So you check that out. It's
okay.
definitely a memorable performance.
Nice.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. The little bit of research I did where I just kind of poked around on Wikipedia to get a few little factoids here and there on these first 3 Aerosmith records, and I thought it was interesting that that first album only went to number 21, and that Dream On didn't really, it wasn't much of a chart hit when it was new. It's something that built up over time and maybe charted even a little higher after it had been out for a few years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're going to find covers of this album that later on that were released, and you're going to see it says the album cover and it says featuring Dream On. So as that song caught wind, they changed the album cover a little bit, and
Yeah, they did.
featuring Dream
Yeah.
On.
They did.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
Andy?
like the cover that you were just describing, Tony, that's the cover that I have on vinyl.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the version that I have on vinyl. or on vinyl, however you want to say it.
Andy, do you want to move on and talk about the second record?
Yes, I do.
March 15th, 1974 was the release date for Get Your Wings. So we see early in 73, the first record, and then early in 74, just a little over a year later, the second album. The peak chart position on this one was only number 74 on the U.S. charts, but this album eventually sold 3 million copies. So a little bit of
Not bad at all for their
on the
second
sales
record.
of the first record. Andy, what's on that album?
The song selection here is Same Old Song and Dance, which is my personal favorite, one of them. Lord of the Thighs, Spaced, Woman of the World, SOS Too Bad, Train Kept a Rolling, which everybody should know, Seasons of Wither, and finally Pandora's Box. And I read that straight off of the vinyl.
Another great old R&B tune they covered there with
exactly, yes.
Train Kept Rolling. The original version recorded at King Records right here in Cincinnati.
This is true.
Who was that? Who did the original Train Kept Rolling?
Oh man,
Tiny Bradshaw, I believe it was.
Yes.
I think.
Yes. Yes. Yes, it was him. It was him.
Was there what kind of airplay was the band getting in these early days? Was Same Old Song and Dance already getting played by rock radio, or was Aerosmith still kind of, operating, kind of flying under the radar?
Well, they were starting to get a following, and like they were starting to build their fan base was starting to build. And correct me if I'm wrong, but their fan club began to become known as the Blue Jean Army because all the people that were following them in the early 70s were all decked out in blue jean jackets.
Yep.
Tell me if this is right, Tony.
You're absolutely right. The Army.
And I just wonder, how much trouble those people got into when Aerosmith were just getting started.
Yeah, I bet you an Aerosmith concert was like the party zone for sure. Even in those early days, you knew what you were in for.
Yeah, no kidding.
Andy, why don't we wrap up part one real quick, and we'll move on to part two of our special mini series about the first three Aerosmith records.
Okay, thank you for everybody. Thank you for watching, and here comes part two.
Tony, thanks for being there, buddy. We appreciate you.
Love talking Aerosmith anytime.
I know that's right.